leave? And when we pulled in yesterday, I said, oh my God, I remember this place. First time I was here, the American girls won the World Cup. And I left signing and went over and sat in that bar and watched it, wherever that bar is.
We got about 3 minutes yet. And we'll...
So we can just
tell
jokes.
You got 3 minutes to tell jokes, yeah.
Tell them about Derek Cracknell.
Oh, all right, yeah. Stanley played around with the idea of several times about what voice would be best for Hal. The first voice he was thinking of, one of the actors he was thinking about was Marty Balsam. You remember Marty Balsam? Wonderful, wonderful actor. But he said, no, it's too New York. And then he finally hired this British actor who was on the set with us by the name of Nigel Davenport. Very fine actor, done a lot of films himself. And he was doing the voice of Hal off camera for us. And very quickly, within a week or so, Stanley said, no, too British, it's wrong. So I'll worry about it in post-production. So he turned to his AD, his first AD, assistant director, and said, Derek, his name was Derek Cracknell, he says, Derek, you do the voice of Hal for the boys, meaning Gary and I. So for the rest of the film, this is the way Hal sounded for us to act with. Dive, I was all like this. You see, we made it, the whole thing in England. It was like working with Michael Caine, you know what I mean? And so we got to the end of the film, and there it was like, Daisy, Daisy. That took acting.
I knew you guys would like that.
I'll tell you
everywhere we go, he does that and people crack.
I'll tell you one other story. It's not a joke, but you remember there's a scene where Mission Control is interviewing us all about this part that's going bad that Hal, of course, is creating, but we don't know that yet. And there's an interview with us, and there was another scene written that we shot where we are talking to Mission Control as opposed to listening to Mission Control. And it was really, I had to learn this speech. It was kind of technological gobbledygook, difficult to memorize. So I was going over it. There wasn't a lot of dialogue in this film, but this was difficult. Long speech, and I got it down, and we shot it. But later in the editing room, Stanley decided it was redundant. It was too similar to the other scene where Mission Control speaks to us, so it was never used. However, because of the way I had learned it, I can still do, this is 50 years this year since we filmed. And this is the way the speech went. Mission Control, this is X-Ray Delta 1. At 1920 on board Fault Prediction Center, 90000 computer showed Alpha Echo 35 units as possible failure within 48 hours. Request check your in-ship system simulator. Also confirm your approval. Our plan to go EVA and replace Alpha Echo 35 unit prior to failure. Mission Control, this is X-Ray Delta 1. Transmission concluded. And that's 50 years ago. And I'll go to my grave singing that, I promise you.
Well, he's covered something about 2001, so we have another minute.
We do.
I'll just tell you about Roddenberry called me up, and he said, and I had just got this movie with Keir called 2001: A Space Odyssey, which you're now familiar with. Anyway, thank you. So what happened was, I said, well, Gene, I can't do your Star Trek pilot because I'm off to do this movie with Stanley Kubrick. What a great thing. Stanley Kubrick in our industry, if you were in our industry, it's like, having God call you to, work on the tablets or something or whatever. So, I don't. No, wait a minute. That was Brigham Young, right? I mean, well, Steve Young was a quarterback. He's a descendant of Brigham Young. I'm full of trivia. You want to play for money? Anyway, I did the Star Trek pilot, and I just wanted to tell you, a lot of you come up and ask me about the eyes. Well, sometimes people who don't know the film industry say, did they put that thing in your eyes after the movie was made? I said, well, that would have cost more money than the pilot, But I did the second pilot. It sold Star Trek, and so there you go. But I wore these contact things for 6 straight days. And I was doing a show recently in Vegas with 50-year Star Trek reunion, and I'm on stage with Sally Kellerman. And I'll be kind about her. She's kind of what we call gossamer wing. You don't know if she's flying this way or this way. I mean, she's a talented woman, but she's very vague. And so she gets the microphone in Vegas, and her first line is, "Well, we're working, and he doesn't know his lines." What? You know, I mean, she's dissing me, you know. She just lost her husband, so maybe, you know, I have no idea why she was doing it. And so after a few minutes, I looked at her and I said, "Sally, just because an actor knows his lines doesn't mean he's any good." So, well, you asking. Anyway, the eyes hurt. It was a terrible job, and I've made an absolute fortune signing on it. So thank you for those of you. Thank you for buying it, because when I sell a 2001 and a Star Trek, in California we have a great hamburger place called In-N-Out Burger, and that's called a double-double. So when you walk away, if you've bought both, you walk away and I go, "Another double-double."
Animal style, of course.
Yes!
Well, as you may have guessed, we're underway here. This is, as you know, Mr. Gary Lockwood and Mr. Keir Dullea, our guests that we're honored to have at the Mid-Atlantic Nostalgia Convention. And let's give them a warm welcome. A couple of quick notes before we get started. If you have any problems hearing us, please let us know. Mr. Dullea and Mr. Lockwood will be available all day tomorrow and into Saturday. They're busy guys down at the table, but they're well worth the visit. So please think about seeing them if you haven't already. They're wonderful, as you're going to find out in just a few minutes. You know, it's one thing when somebody is a very talented person in our popular culture and our popular arts. It's another neat thing when you find out they're pretty neat people besides just all their talent, and this is the case with these two gentlemen. So stop by and see them tomorrow. Before we go any further, too...
You just call me a gentleman?
Yeah, it's late in the day. I have weaknesses.
Thank you.
We want to thank Mr. Martin Grams also. It's never redundant to thank Martin for all his good work on the convention. And if you will, for just 15 seconds, let me tell you, I want these gentlemen to talk. I don't want to hear me. I want to set up sort of our format today for a little bit and tell you what's going on. First of all, I'll provide a very brief, very incomplete biography for both of these fine men. Then I've got a couple of quick questions myself, and then we'll make sure to leave plenty of time for you to offer your inquiries at that point as well. Does that sound good to everyone?
Yes, sir.
Good. All right. Well, we're going to go back and forth between them. As you know, this is Mr. Lockwood to my immediate right. Mr. Lockwood was born in California. We know where that is. It's a long ways from here. And like Mr. Dullea, his story in theater, film, and television reads as a who's who in those three particular popular media. It's just absolutely amazing if you spend any time looking and seeing what they've done. Mr. Lockwood, one of his earliest roles was as a stand-in for Anthony Perkins. You remember Mr. Perkins as Norman Bates.
I wasn't actually his stand-in. I went to see about doubling him.
Stunt double.
And the director put me in the movie as an actor. That's how I started.
Wonderful. Which movie was that?
It's called Tolstoy.
Good, that's right.
Yeah, somebody got that wrong. I'm sorry.
Okay, no, thank you for correcting me. And of course, this would be right at the time that a friend of mine, the late Robert Bloch, wrote the novel, and it would be a year later that Psycho would be out in 1960. Mr. Lockwood's been in a range of television series and movies, from everything from Follow the Sun. He's worked with legendary people. He has worked with Mr. Roddenberry, as we know, with Mr. Kubrick in film. He was on the Perry Mason TV show, a legendary TV show, and a whole range of very, very famous things. He's maybe one of the best things he's known for is for his role as Gary Mitchell, as he talked about here in just a few minutes ago. In the first hour-long episode, it wasn't the pilot. The pilot was, of course, The Cage, the 2-hour episode. But if I may be so bold as to...
It was a pilot.
It was.
Yeah, they did 2 pilots.
Mm-hmm.
And he made one, and it was rejected in New York. And so, this is a quote from Roddenberry. He called me up and he asked me to do a second pilot. And I said, I'm on the way to do Stanley Kubrick's movie. I'm not going to do that. And he asked me if I would. I had a relationship with him. I did like him.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, I was told to try to get you, and if I could, I might be able to get on TV. And he and I had done The Lieutenant together, and as crazy as Gene was, I liked him. And so I did it. And when I got to the London, I told Keir about it. And I found out it was sold when I went to Sandy Lieberson's to get my per diem one day.
Oh, that's wonderful. If I may just hazard a moment, as great as Mr. Roddenberry was, and we've read about him, we've read his autobiography, my wife's well familiar with his work, and I'm an original Star Trek fan. She's the Next Generation, and we stay together for the kids. But at any rate, your role in Where No Man Has Gone Before really sets the frame for the whole series.
Thank you.
Here's a man that, as a young kid, films. You finished filming in '65. It comes out in '66. I'm about 7 or 8, and I'm watching the premiere all the time. And we love you to the end, even though you turn into this monster. And you really rip our hearts up because we know the end is not going to be good for you. You're way too. I'd never heard of Spinoza till I heard that you were. I watched you on Star Trek reading that on the screen.
Yeah.
And
Gary Mitchell was hard to deal with, particularly in cards.
You were great though, and I think it's a very important framework for the whole series is your role in that episode Where No Man Has Gone Before. So we won't belabor that. We've got some questions we want to ask you, and now we'll turn for a moment to Mr. Dullea. I've got the question I want to ask him, and we'll ask him in a minute. It's about his mom and dad because bookstores are a dear passion for me. And when my wife and I met decades ago in a great use. Well, okay. She was a kid anyway. But and as we talk about Mr. Dullea for a minute, I would mention before leaving Mr. Lockwood for the moment that he has a fabulous website. If you ever want to look at it, it's really very, very well done.
Thank you.
I enjoy that a great deal. And I've heard rumor you're working on an autobiography.
I am working on a book called Beyond the Pod Bay Doors.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful. Thank you. So Mr. Dullea is originally from Cleveland.
Well, I was born in Cleveland, but my parents left when I was 3, so I really, I don't remember.
It was a starting point.
Anybody here from Cleveland? No? Nobody. Anyway.
Got one hand.
No, I was brought up in Greenwich Village.
Yes. And you were very well traveled at an early age.
Well, yeah, I traveled to Astoria, Queens, and when I was
Sure.
when I was 3, and then when I was 5, my parents found an apartment. It was during the war. It was hard to find an apartment, but they found an apartment in Greenwich Village. They had just opened. They moved because they were going to open up a bookstore in Greenwich Village, and so, but they couldn't find an apartment, so they had to commute from Astoria, and where I met Mayor LaGuardia.
The little
He came
flower.
to our nursery school, and we all lined up to have a quick photo op sitting on his knee. So I got to sit on LaGuardia's knee.
The little flower was his nickname.
What?
The little flower was his
Little
nickname.
Flower, right.
That's right. Very good. Well, you were in a range of things. Theater is very much part of your background and your artistic abilities and your accomplishments. And you played a range of complex characters, some somewhat disturbed and with all kinds of different. Again, you were truly an actor because you played these different types of characters, as I understand it. And like Mr. Lockwood, you was a who's who of early television, your time in theater, your time in movies. We won't even drop the names because I'm more interested in you two today than Rod Serling and Elvis Presley. But it's...
I worked with both of them.
I know you did. I know you did. So I talked to my son the other day. He works out at a university out in South Dakota, and I said, I was doing this out in Baltimore. He says to me, he said, "You're going to meet Dave?" I said, "Yeah, I'm going to meet Dave." He said, "From 2001. You know what his name is? It's Dave. It's Dave, too. Yeah. But
Don't you think Dave Bowman is maybe the most famous character in sci-fi?
Oh, he's amazing.
Yeah.
He's absolutely amazing.
He was doing a movie in Poland, and he texted me, and I texted him back, and I said, keep in mind, Dave may be the most famous guy in all of sci-fi.
It's amazing, yes.
Yeah.
And you were in more than, in terms of not only feature-length films, you were in more than 2001.
Yeah, I've done 30 features.
Mm-hmm.
Worked from people like, oh God, I was played.
How about your favorite German?
What?
Your favorite German?
Oh yeah. Well, you know how it is. I did. This was early television, and they were going to do a play based on with Maureen O'Hara. It had been a famous movie, and they repeated it. And the name of the film, I can't remember what it was. The one. But anyway, it doesn't matter. But it's so. I auditioned. I was a young actor. I hadn't done any films. This is well before I did films. And I auditioned for, and I had a good German accent. I don't speak a word of German, not a word. But I had a good accent. I'd done a play in German. And so I auditioned for it, and they liked me, and they said, but we're going to do it in, no, they didn't say we're going. So they said, you speak German. Well, I lied because I wanted to get the part. and they cast me. And just before we go to rehearsal, I get a call from my agent saying, they're very pleased, but they've changed their minds. They're going to do it in German. No. Well, do not speak a word. However, a friend of mine from drama school went to the Army School of Languages to learn, and he had actually been brought up speaking Yiddish, which is a low form of German, and then the Air Force sent him to language school, and he learned German perfectly with no accent, and I learned the whole part phonetically. And I'll just do one speech from it, went like this. Anybody speak German here, by any chance? No? Okay, I can get it. You just speak ein bisschen, ja? Ja. Ich bin kaputt, aber andere Deutsche kommen. Tausend andere kommen und die bombardieren. Wir haben viele wichtige Städte bombardiert. Wasser-Narvik, Rotterdam kaputt. Rotterdam war in 15 Minuten kaputt und wir werden sie kaputt machen. Wir machen England tot. Ganz nicht mehr England. Männer, Weiber, Kinder, alles kaputt, alles tot. And that was 1961 when I did that. Yeah.
Keir, you know, when I said tell him the German story, no.
I got another one for me?
No, yeah. Hold on for 1 second here, yeah. I wanted you to tell us the story about when that actor who was directing you told you to relax.
Oh, yeah, Otto Preminger, you know. Otto Preminger was the biggest bull. He was a screamer. He was awful. You know, if you saw Stalag 17, he played the German commandant of the prisoner of war camp. That was Otto on a nice day. But there was a film called Advise and Consent that he did about the Washington politics, and apparently he'd been giving this actor, New York actor, a hard time, and he was way up in the camera boom, oh God, way up, and looking down at this actor, the actor probably looked about this big, and he had been screaming at him all day, and suddenly the actor stopped in the middle of the take, and he said, Mr. Preminger, I've been in the theater for 40 years. It's always been I'm paraphrasing. I've always felt very strong. The director's the boss, and I applaud that, and I respect the direction. But sir, I am sorry. I cannot continue without an apology. Well, there was dead silence. Everyone's waiting for Otto to blow. and he was bald, and he had a big vein, and his vein would begin to pulse, and his head would get all red, and sometimes a little saliva would begin to trickle down. And he looked down at this actor who was about to, and he went, "All right, I apologize, but you have no talent." Nice man.
Do you mind if I say?
Please, go right ahead.
When he stood up, it made me think of a story very similar. I was working on a movie called Warlock. When I used to be a cowboy stuntman, that's kind of what I used to do. And I was in the rodeo as a kid, and I was a trick rider with Monty Montana. And I became an actor by an accident, and I'm very happy it happened because it was a really easy way to make a living. Anyway, the end of the story is I'm working on this cowboy movie called Warlock, and I'm up in the mountains, and I'm dressing as an Indian in the morning and a cavalry officer in the afternoon, and doing these charges downhill. And here's two incidents from the movie. One of them, we're up in the side of a mountain. There's 20 of us, and the director is a famous guy named Yakima Canutt, one of the most famous people in the history of cinema. And he's the second unit director on this movie. And he goes like this: "All right, fellas, here's what you're going to do. On action," and it's all snowy, and and there's 20 of us, and we're all playing Indians, and we're all in white body makeup and everything, and we don't have saddles. We're just bareback, which, by the way, bareback is like not possible, in the winter in the snow. And we're all up there going, "Okay." And he said, "And we want you on action. I want you just to charge down the mountain as fast as you can, all 20. Not one of us made it to the bottom. So there's a picture somewhere at Fox Studio of 20 guys coming down a mountain and everybody falling off. That's one. Here's the end of the story. So I'm on the last day of the picture. I get called in to be a cowboy in a bar fight, and we're shooting the bar fight. And there's an old guy up in the, well, now I'm 15 years older than that old guy. I never thought I'd still be alive, but you could retire from our industry at 65 if you were a grip. So this old guy spent his whole career with a belt and all the pliers and hammers hanging off of it. And Mervyn LeRoy was the director, and he was a very famous guy. He owned Hollywood Racetrack, and he was rich, and he was an unbearable guy. And he had fired me once on this movie, but the cowboy guy that handled all the jokes, Canutt, I was a really fine trick writer. He had me come back, and he said, "When you come back to the job, just make sure you stay out of Mervyn's way." So one night I was out in the country, and I got kind of drunk, and I lost my way back to the town. So I'm hitchhiking. Guess who picks me up? Mervyn LeRoy. He doesn't even remember he fired me. And he's telling me, and we're driving, and he's driving in the station wagon. And he says, "So where do you live?" I said, "Well, I went to UCLA. I live in Malibu on the beach." He says, "Oh, you do, huh? So you went to UCLA?" "Right." I said, "Well, do you know Westwood Ford?" He said, "I own it." I said, "Aha. You see those lights out there in the desert?" I said, "Yeah, those are rock crushers. I own them too." I said, "Oh, yeah." And the whole time I'm kind of looking, well, he won't really look at me, Okay, that's one. Now, here's the last incident. We drive into town, he lets me out. He says, "Good night, take care of yourself, whoever you are." I'm working for his company. Anyway, on the last day of Warlock, we're doing a bar fight, and we're all in there doing fight and choreographing. And some old guy, it's his last day in the business. I'll never forget this. One of the funniest things ever happened in my entire career. And he's up there, and so it's time to do some dialogue, and they're real quiet, and this old guy drops a hammer or something, makes a bit of noise. And Leroy looks up there and starts chewing the guy out. What is going on, for God's sake? And he had these little cigars, and he'd throw them down. "I told you to be quiet up there, for Christ's sake. God, and he's just going on like a banshee. "Who did that?" And I'll never forget, this old guy, well, now he's younger than I am, but this old guy stands up and he unbuckles his big belt with all the pliers and everything. He drops it right on right on the set, and he's up in the flies up there. And he goes, boom, and the thing falls, and he comes down, and he walks over, and he climbs down this ladder, and he walks up to Mervyn. I told you this, didn't I?
No.
I never told you this story. He walks up to Mervyn Leroy, and he said, Mr. Leroy, this is my last day in the business, and I've been on different jobs with you over the years, and you've been yelling at all of us, all of our lives, and he just hauled off and knocked him out. I mean, he was an old guy who'd been lifting stuff all of his life, and he was in great shape, and he just went boom like this, and that was it. I think I got overtime that day.
As well you should have, yeah. What was your childhood like, Mr. Lockwood? How did you get into the business? I know a lot of people want to ask that question.
Oh, real simple. I went to double Tony Perkins in the picture, Tall Story.
Sure.
I had been a UCLA guy. I was a bit of a hustler as a kid, and this plays a little role here.
Mm-hmm.
And I was not I'm writing my book about my life now, and looking at it, I've been a bit of a rogue for the most part. I've not really been a good person my whole life. So in college, I was kind of a hustler. I sold football tickets, and I was a player, and I was a money lender. I was a lot of things. I got kicked out of school for a year, and then I came back. And so when I get back into California, I went to Mexico and lived for a while. I worked on a fishing boat there. So now I'm back, and one of our football coaches is cashing a check at this place where we all cashed our checks. And I see that it says Warner Brothers, and I said, what are you doing? You're working for Warner Brothers Studio? Well, when I'd been a cowboy stuntman with Monty Montana a couple of times, I had worked in the business, because Monty got hired. And he said, this coach looked at me, and I was a wild kid, and he said, hey, don't you go do this. He said, you're one of the kind of guys that run off and be an actor. Well, I didn't have any intention of doing it, but I just saw the check, and I said, I know how to do horses, and there were about 50 cowboy shows on television. I'm not kidding. There must have been 40 or 50 on TV. Right. And if you could get in that business, you could there are times for those first couple of years that I worked on 2 jobs at one time. I worked on Pork Chop Hill at night and Texas John Slaughter in daytime. I mean, you have to remember, money went a long way in those days. And if you were making about $1,000 a week doing that, you were really taking in the cash. So here's the end of the story. I go to Warner Brothers to see about doubling Tony Perkins, and I see the cameraman, and the technical director was a UCLA athlete like me, and he got hired to be the technical director in Tall Story. And director Joshua Logan, that's how I got my name Lockwood. He ended up discovering me. Logan looked at me, and I said,